Hello and welcome to a new episode of Interpreting India. From geopolitical complexities to economic uncertainties, India faces critical challenges in its quest for a more prominent role on the world stage. This season, we at Carnegie India continue to bring voices from India and around the world to examine the role of technology, the economy, and international security in shaping India's future. India's internal and external security challenges from state and non-state actors are aplenty. From recent memory, you can talk about the tense standoff at the border with China, Pakistan's fostering of militants across the border, to an internal security situation with, for example, left-wing extremism. But these challenges are not new. India has faced a challenging security environment from its very independence. But India's armed forces have not necessarily been equipped sufficiently or in a timely manner to face these security challenges. In part, that has to do with India's defense industry, which is yet to come of age. Between 2019 and 2023, India was the world's top arms importer, and between 2020 and 2024, it was Ukraine. In some sense, it took a country fighting 3 years of a war to top India's arms imports. Now, there have been several attempts over the past decade and beyond to concretely establish India's defense industry. There have been degrees of success, but challenges remain as well. I'm Saib Singh Chadha, a senior research analyst in the Security Studies program at Carnegie India. Joining us today for this episode and to discuss these questions is his distinguished guest, Lieutenant General P.R. Shankar. General Shankar is a retired Director General of Artillery in the Indian Army. He is an alumnus of National Defence Academy, Khadakwasla, Defence Services Staff College, Wellington, Army War College, Mao, Naval Postgraduate School, Monterey, and National Defence College, New Delhi. He has held important command, staff, and instructional appointments in the Army. He has helped move forward India's artillery modernization through indigenization. General Shankar is presently a professor in the Aerospace Department of Indian Institute of Technology, Madras. Might I add, he also runs a very successful YouTube channel called Gunner's Shot, which focuses on defense and strategic affairs. General Shankar, welcome to Interpreting India.
Thanks a lot, Sahib, for calling me over on this show. It's a pleasure to interact with you, and I look forward to it.
Thank you, sir. If I may ask, could you start by giving us your big picture sense of India's defense industrial base before we delve deeper into the opportunities and challenges? What is your sense?
The first thing I'd like to put across is, we have a reasonably good defense industrial base. In fact, it's a very wide industrial base. Right. But I'll step back a bit before I get back to this industrial base. I'd like to say something. Ever since independence, like you said in your opening remarks, we've had conflicts. We've faced wars with China, Pakistan, internal issues and insurgency. We've also done out-of-area contingencies, operations in Maldives. We've undertaken peacekeeping operations all over the world and humanitarian operations and rescue missions and all that. I would like to put it on record, all this wouldn't have been possible if our armed forces were not well equipped. So the international notion that the Indian armed forces are not fully well equipped is a bit, false. We are well equipped for the task at hand. I always say that the Indian armed forces are adequately modernized and adequately equipped and trained and fully competent to defend the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of the nation. We have not failed in this except for 1962. The thing which we have to discuss really, and the backdrop against which we are discussing is the fact, and that's the question, is India modern enough, or the Indian armed forces, are they modern enough for India to assume the role of a regional or a global player, right? So in that context, when you look at the defense industries in India, we have a huge net. We inherited a lot from the British when we gained independence. And that has proliferated. And when we inherited the Indian defense industries, it was largely, uh, you know, uh, public undertakings or public sector units, or we had a huge network of 41 ordnance factories. These two in combination gave us virtually everything we needed, right? Of course, we were import dependent because for all these factories and setup network which we had was given to us by the Britishers because they had to maintain the British Indian Army here. So the production part, we've never had a problem. But the Britishers never gave technology. So the issue was always we didn't have technology, so we had to rely on import. And which we've been doing one way or the other. Now, through the years, it is now, we felt that we are not on our own. We don't have the capability to equip our armed forces through our own methods or through our own research and development. And a whole lot of things have happened, especially in the last 15, 20 years. So those who think now, I think are also off the mark. This whole process started somewhere at the turn of the century and somewhere immediately after the Kargil war. And ever since that, there's been a ceaseless effort to what today we call Atmanirbharta. And of late, you see that the private industry has come in a big manner. And there's a huge expansion of the private industry. Till about half a dozen years back, our private industry was not fully keyed into defense manufacturing and was not oriented towards defense manufacturing. But that has changed drastically. And today, most of the big industrial houses in India have some role to play in defense manufacturing, and that's expanding. It's only a matter of time that I will put it, these processes are not going to be slow. This industrialization or reorientation of normal industry to defense industry will be a decadal process, 10 years, maybe a decade and a half. So we are well on our way. To that extent, I'm quite sanguine that we are okay. But that doesn't mean we don't import, because we still have to import certain equipment, some technologies. But the thing which we have been able to do is that once upon a time, we were far too dependent on the British, sometimes towards the Americans and all that, and sometimes we were over-dependent on the Russians. But today, that dependency has evened out, right? Though it is said that a lot of our equipment is Russian origin, it is, but slowly the dependency is reducing. Once upon a time, our dependency on the Russian equipment was about 60 to 70%. Today, it's down to about 35 to 40%. So there is we are spreading the risks, if I say, of import from, only a single source to multiple sources. To that extent, we have become more self-dependent and probably a little more autonomous than what we were 4 to 5 years back. I think that's the large overviewing picture of the defense industrial base.
Okay, sir. Thank you for that overview. And yes, point well taken that there's been positive developments in the past few years. And yes, we've diversified our dependence. So my next question is: you spoke about how historically there's not been enough technology transfer. And the private sector has relatively recently ventured into the space. Now, one of the issues that I've come across is that private players are either not willing or not capable enough to invest in R&D capabilities, which is very capital intensive. And these R&D capabilities are essential for reducing dependency on imports. They create security challenges. We have the recent example of Chinese components in Indian drones and the moves by the government to sort of crack down on that. So what is the state of play with research and development capabilities in particular, and what's the nature of the challenge there?
See, again, the research and development, as far as the defense sector is concerned in India, the DRDO was the sole, agency to carry it out. For many reasons, the R&D, as far as defense is concerned, was not opened out to the private sector. That's the one part of it. The second part of it is that the way private sector in India has developed in all sectors, the focus was not on technology development. It was more on technology absorption and using the technology for maximizing profit. So that you had a situation where the DRDO was the sole agency for defense research, and the private sector was let off completely. Now that process will take a long time to reverse, because the private sector as of now is still not tuned to the fact that they have to invest into R&D. Right. The third part of this is that even when we had capability, or rather we had arrangements to get technology from abroad as part of a transfer of technology arrangement, we've not been able to convert that into good use and adapt it and expand it. That realization has set in. So at this point of time, there is also this feeling that, look, our great, or rather very important technical establishments, or or academia, like the IITs, are underexploited at this point of time. I mean, look at it. The IITs have produced the CEOs of the biggest companies in the world, including the first name which comes to my mind is Sundar Pichai of Google. So why couldn't the same guys from the same institutions produce something for India, technology for India? So that realization has set in. So what we are seeing now is fine. The DRDO continues development of core technologies and hardcore technologies, and certain fields it will go on. Expand into IITs, use IITs increasingly for carrying out research and development. Let the private players loose to say, you also invest in technology. And they encourage the private players getting into technology arrangements with those who are importing as joint ventures, so that the technology rubs off, right? And then, of course, promote a startup ecosystem in the defense sector, so that a lot of these niche technologies and small technologies or incremental technologies, which ultimately make the big thing, go to the startups. So this is a four-pronged approach which you today see happening. Yeah, it might not be visible. Let me put it this way: it might not be visible. The results might not be absolutely visible, but they're happening. And they're happening because the change has already started happening in a few sectors. And we've had successes also, about which we can discuss. So the next part of the problem is that the government of India has not been able to put in enough money, into research. And this is a perennial problem with the government, because for a developing country like India, it's always a quandary whether to put money into R&D, which is at best risky, or you have to commit yourself to social schemes and social upliftment of people. So far, the trend line has been to go towards social upliftment, development, education, and all that. But even that is changing, right? So there is a larger understanding in India and realization in India that we have to do our own research, right? And if not broad-based across everything, at least in certain core areas. And that is something which will, I'm sure, as we go along, will bear results. It's a matter of time. Again, like I said, none of these things will happen immediately. I can see the difference. What was not there in 2000 happened in 2010. What was not there in 2010 has happened in 2020. And now things are going at a faster pace. Slowly, this pace of change is, increasing. And I find it, uh, at least I have a feel good factor about it.
Right, sir. Um, that point is also well taken. India does need to do its own research, and research is especially, I would say, an important component of self-sufficiency or autonomy in some sense. Now, sir, another issue that's frequently sort of discussed is the sort of, dare I say, painful procurement processes followed by the state, which private actors either don't have the skill or the expertise to navigate. And there are several issues here, such as requirements that are either unrealistic in terms of the technological capability demanded or the timeline laid out, or the budget provided for these capabilities, or all three, or some combination of these three. So, could you possibly shed light on this procurement challenge and reforms undertaken to improve it?
A lot of issues of defense acquisition and procurement uh, actually are in place. I am of the firm opinion that you don't need too many, procedures and, all that rules and regulations. What you need is clear intent and clarity of thought that you need a thing and you need to procure it. Wherever we have adopted that route, we've been successful. Where there is haziness in this or clarity, lack of clarity in, how to go about doing things or what you want, there India has stumbled. And I'll be very frank about it. Uh, that is where there is always a gap between what the forces want and what people can get and what can be delivered in time, because everything is a matter of time, what you can accept and not accept, and how you have to fight your battle the way you want to. We have a system in place. I take my mind back to 84, 85. And why? We brought this gun called the Bofors in. Right? We did a very bold deal at that point of time for 400 guns, which have stood us well. They've ensured that we won a war also, and they've also ensured many other things. Now, the fact is, if you go back at that time, we had no procedures, we had no reforms, no nothing. We had very elemental, sketchy procedures and rules and regulations in place. Yet we managed to do that. The fact that whole deal went, topsy-turvy was for political reasons, for not for the integrity of the reforms. But that issue has cast a long shadow on our complete defense reforms, procedures, and everything. So ever since then, after that upheaval, our defense procedures and systems, whichever way you look at it, have been clouded with that overhang. People are not very confident of going ahead. Then there's this bureaucratic outlook of safety first and things like that. Many issues. So I would say that, it's not that we don't have adequate rules and regulations in place. I think the fundamental thing which we need to understand is that our whole procurement system, I'm talking of the system, needs a better human approach. People who run the system have to be more proficient at it. Why? Because over the years we made it complicated. As we made it complicated, India find itself, in knots to navigate the very systems it has created. That is the challenge, right? And people get stuck in that. But again, if you have clarity of thought, you get over all these. I mean, let me give a very loose example. We all know that whether Bible, Bhagavad Gita, or Quran, they're all great books, a lot of knowledge, a lot of ways of life, how to live life and all. But you don't keep looking at those every day. You don't open a holy book to live life the normal way. You go back to the holy book to find, okay, is there a way I can get out of my whole story? You go back to it when needed. Similarly, our reforms and everything has to go around the fact that, look, I need to reform the system. I need to reform my thinking. And I need to go ahead with procure what I want. And I use the procedures and the rules which have been in place to my advantage. This is the dichotomy which I think Indian defense system or the procurement system faces. As a result, when you go by the book always, there's a tendency of dying by the book. So, so we have to get out of that. And that can be done by people who are proficient in this whole story, who have the expertise to do all that. And that is something which, again, is increasing. But there's a big problem in this because a bureaucratic setup, which is quite transitory in its way it goes about doing its business, because they come and go, they can't have the fundamental knowledge of how to go about this whole story of defense procurement, because they don't have the base knowledge of what weapons are and all that. So we are in a bit of a rut here. Let me be very honest, and I think it's time that we have to devise new methods to get out of this rut. And to that extent, my view is there has to be more integration within our defense headquarters, the bureaucracy, the politicians, and the armed forces, who are the three main players. And then these have to be adequately supported by the DRDO and private sectors. And ultimately, it is the armed forces who have to drive the system. Until the armed forces are knowledgeable enough to drive the system, we'll have problems. That's what my take is on reforms and all that.
No, thank you, sir. All very helpful to understand this. You referred to a few success stories you spoke about, and my next question is about that. We've discussed a few challenges till now on research and development, procurement, manufacturing. But could you perhaps help me understand a few success stories that have worked and why they have worked? And what are the lessons that can be taken and applied to other equipment that the armed forces are looking to get? For example, the export of BrahMos missile systems or Pinaka rockets, all which you would know very well about as an artillery person, sir. So could you tell us about a few success stories and why they have been success stories?
Why not? Yeah. For this, I'll have to go back around 2010. In 2010, there was a report in the media which said that, look, this is an army in search of an artillery and an artillery in search of ammunition. The fundamental thing is, at that point of time, we didn't have guns, we didn't have ammunition. What we had was old stuff, age-old stuff, right? Around 2010 till 2010, the last major procurement we had done was in 84, Bofors. After that, they were all incremental in nature. But then things started changing after that. But things didn't change in 2010. Things started changing around 2000 itself, after the Kargil War. After the Kargil War, it was decided, certain things came to light, and we decided that we should do something positive so that the whole story changes. And this is, I'm just taking the example of artillery, right? I call this the artillery model. There's a great model here. Okay. We started executing that plan. We drew a plan which is called the Artillery 2017 plan. Right? In 2000. We drew that plan out and started executing, and then we failed. We continued to fail till 2010. Around 2008-9, we decided, look, that artillery plan 2017 was not working. So we recast that plan and made it artillery 2027 plan. Okay. There was not much difference between the two. Certain rough edges in that earlier plan was put in together. Otherwise, the fundamentals were the same. And then we started reworking based on the past 10 years, 8 years mishaps we've had and got down to it. Now, what's the result? I will not say how we went about it. What is the result? The result is, I met that person, that media person who wrote that the army in search of artillery and artillery in search of ammunition later. Right. Today, what's the status? In the past 7-8 years, starting from about 2012 to 2020. In fact, 2017, the whole thing turned around in that 5-year period. We inducted the ultralight howitzer M777 from USA. We inducted the Vajra. We inducted a gun called Sharang. And we finished trials of Dhanush. Dhanush also started getting inducted 4 gun systems. Simultaneously, we inducted the Pinaka in great numbers and fielded it on ground. Along with this, we also increased our inventory of BrahMos. And we also started looking at extending the range of BrahMos. It didn't stop here. You could have all the guns you wanted, but you needed ammunition, which we didn't have then. So we started going about reforming our ammunition procurement process from fuses to shells to the charge systems, because there are 3 components which we didn't have at that time. Opened up new lines for all these, right? A matter from 2010 to we could have toward 2015-16, around the time when Doklam happened, 2017, Indian Army had enough ammunition to face China. That was a turnaround. Okay. Like what you see today, people are, we had adequate to start. I mean, if we respond to China, if push comes to a shove. And we built the capacities to produce ammunition. You see Russia struggling for artillery ammunition. 80% of a war is artillery ammunition. So, so we had turned things around. And then we also went around getting certain weapon locating radars, indigenous, mind you. So, and this entire ammunition was indigenous, weapon locating radars indigenous, the missile systems and rocket systems were indigenous, including that ammunition, complete. And then you looked at our gun systems. Out of the 4 which we had inducted, 2 were completely indigenous. 1 was part indigenous. 1 started as an import, but today I can say it's almost indigenous. So there's a transformation which has happened. Today, Indian artillery is indigenous with capacity. Okay. It happened due to clarity of thought. It happened due to a plan. And this plan didn't start now. It started in 2000, like I said. And we held on to that plan, right? And look, in the army, there's, not in the army, in the armed forces, in the military, say, selection and maintenance of aim is one of the most important principles of war. So we selected an aim and held on to that. And we achieved it. Today, we are in a position where we've inducted the 5th gun, the ATAGS. Right? It's not only ATAGS has been inducted, we already started, like you rightly said, we are exporting BrahMos, we are exporting Pinaka, we are also started exporting guns. From a stage where 2010 we were in utter doldrums to now, 14 years, there's a huge turnaround. Okay? So there is a model already there. Similarly, in air defense system, there's been a partial turnaround already. Okay? And our Navy, the way we've gone about building our hulls and the ships, also, we learned from that. I learned from that. I'm very proud to say that, look, I was part of this artillery modernization plan, and, I was there in it as a brigadier, I was there in it as a major general and lieutenant general. Ultimately, we are on a good nick. So it's not, it's very easy to say India doesn't have technology. No, I think is misreading the fact completely. Like I said in the beginning, we have enough what it takes to defend the nation. What we lack is to become a regional power. There's a difference. The capacity to be a regional power is what we are now looking at. And that is why all these defense reforms, clarity of thought, putting more money, more research, getting private people in, all that is going on to be the regional power, not for defending the nation. On that, we have never had a doubt. Many people also think that, we had trouble defending, the LAC against the Chinese. Let me assure you, this is something which a lot of your listeners must understand. Ultimately, what happened? We held the Chinese with no one's help. No one came to help us. Okay? We held the Chinese and pushed them back. It took us 4 years. We pushed them back to the starting point. And now they are in a quandary. Look, having built, India didn't have that kind of strength out there. Today, the strength which is there on the borders, having built, they have to face an equal mass. They're no more a superior mass. Okay? They are on the back foot today. They are on the back foot politically also. And on that, I can have a discussion with anyone, anytime. Right? Because if there's a reverse in the Himalayas, like it happened on the Kailash ranges, they are in trouble politically. Xi Jinping might lose his, job. So, so there are huge success stories. I think in times to come, the Tejas and the follow-up will also be a success story. It's a matter of time. We are at a time of metamorphosis. So that is something which people have to understand.
So, sir, a follow-up question is this artillery plan, first 2017, then 2027, then in 2025, and the process began in 2000. Dare I say we don't have the luxury of another 25 years to sort of, apply this model to other sectors. So are we in the process of using this model right now to sort of, as a force multiplier, to reform other sectors of procurement as well?
Yeah, it's already on. That model has been borrowed, at least I can vouch for the Army. The Navy didn't need it because the Navy always had it. I think even the Air Force has adopted it. So the other parts of the Army have already gone into it. They've already borrowed this model. It's already 5-6 years in the making. And for any results to come out on this will take a decade. It's not going to be before a decade. So at this point of time, you might feel that not much is happening. But let me assure you, a lot is happening. And that, it'll roll out in its due course. And like I say, we might not have the luxury of time. I agree with you. This is a thing which many people feel that we don't have time. Otherwise, our time gap is closing. It's not so. Like I said, we have to be clear as to what is this luxury of time we don't have for. The luxury of time, I keep repeating, is for us to gain enough capacity to be a regional power, not to defend India. On that, I never had doubts.
Right, sir. So, you spoke about imports, including the M777 howitzers from the US, which brings me to my next question, which is about international partnerships. Now, India has several partnerships in defense equipment, including with the US, Russia, France, Israel, and a lot is said about the opportunity and scope in these partnerships. And while I welcome your views on that, I'd also like you to tell us perhaps about the challenges present in international partnerships. For example, does the attractiveness of a superior technological capability that's available in a faster time frame, even if the costs are far higher, take away from allocating resources to the domestic development of that capability? Simply put, are we prone to prioritizing short-term security considerations over long-term interests?
I don't think that's the case, to be very honest. there's been a balanced approach in this whole story. What you need now, and if you don't have it, you have no choice but to import. So to that extent, the strategy has been, okay, import what you need, the minimum you need, so that you can tide over the present. Also, when you import, don't be dependent on one source, have multiple sources. So that's been our general strategy in terms of import is concerned. Simultaneous to that, while you get over short-term requirements through import, there's always been a parallel program which has started off, which is kick-started, so that your long-term requirements are met. And in case needed, through joint partnerships and all that, or joint ventures, you get that technology in to cater for your long-term. So that has been on. There's no doubt about it. And for that, to that extent, we've gone in for international cooperation in a big manner, right? Earlier, our experience was that no one was prepared to give us technology, but slowly that is coming unhinged. They'll have to give technology. I mean, look at it the other way around. Someone has technology to give you arms. What will he do with technology if he doesn't have a market? So he needs a market. Otherwise, that technology, they will die out. Like it's died out in Europe. Europe didn't with its technology. Europe didn't cultivate external, partnerships. So today, Europe is is in such a position that it has to come to India and say, "Will you produce for us?" And that is happening because they're looking at remilitarizing and looking after their own defense at this point of time. So I think suddenly people have started realizing that, look, it's good to go in for technology partnerships with India. Because India has the scale to do many things, right? And it's got the skill also to do many things. And that's changing. At the same time, we've also learned a lot about international, defense cooperation. Over the past, say, 10, 15 years, we've also learned, look, we just don't start looking at just importing and being done with it. Let's get into cooperative agreements. And cooperative agreements where there is benefit to both. And, there's commonality. For example, India and USA have a defense and strategic partnership. So one of the things we are looking at is commonality of equipment. So today there's a lot of commonality of equipment with USA in terms of our aircraft, Apaches, C-17s, Predators, even guns and radars. We have a lot of commonality. What does that enable? That enables us to carry out joint operations. We do a lot of joint training also today. We do a lot of joint exercises also today. And that contributes not only to the larger India-US defense partnership, it also caters for the Indo-Pacific strategy. So, it also caters for disaster management, interestingly. What people don't understand is that the whole concept of the Quad and the Indo-Pacific strategy started with the 2004 tsunami. It started with disaster management. So all these put together, there's a shift in the way we are doing, international defense cooperation. It's no more a buyer-seller relationship. It's no more a technology giver, provider, and a taker relationship. Right? It's just not pure procurement. It is something beyond that. It is a holistic approach which is unfolding. Again, in certain spheres, it is apparent. In certain spheres, it is not that apparent. And I think you'll see this rolling out. Like I said earlier, you're at a time of change. And at times of change, not many things are visible. But in due course, they will be.
All right, so turning to my final question, which is, how would you, over the past decade, reflect on, or even beyond the past decade, reflect on efforts to reform the defense industrial base through broader measures like the PLI scheme to incentivize domestic manufacturing in general, which, like you said, is important for a turn into defense manufacturing in particular. or so you have these more general measures, or through more targeted measures like positive indigenization lists? How would you sort of reflect on efforts to reform this space and move it forward?
I think the government has done admirably in this, and this again started around 2008, 2009. It's not a process which is of today. There's an old process. We are looking at it a decade and a half down the line. A lot of things have paid off. A lot of things have not paid off because this complete story was uncharted territory for the government also. It was uncharted territory for most of us at that point of time. I see this changing steadily. It has changed quite a bit. And now I think there's a certain amount of maturity in going about all these issues. Now we're very clear that when you say indigenization list, I mean, the way you look at it, positive, negative, that's a different story. But okay, in certain areas, you have the technology, you have the wherewithal, you have the capacities. You don't have to import. In fact, in those capacity areas, we started exporting, right? So things are changing. For example, we didn't have an export policy, say, till about 5 years back. It was only a dream. But today you're exporting. The moment you start exporting, things will happen, and your everything will start changing. So your method of going about your reforms, your procedures, everything will start changing. So to that extent, yes, there's been a lot of trial and error kind of a thing, and that's how it has to be because we have not had you don't have a matrix on which you can go back to. It's all new, right? It is only based on intent. And if the intent is clear and you are sure that you want to do what you have to do for yourself, things will roll out. So at this point of time, I think we are midway somewhere. So like I said, I keep repeating, many things are happening which you can't see today. But you already see certain things, the first issues. For example, like you said, we started export which never happened earlier. You started thinking of indigenization lists, right? And you also started thinking of going beyond big items. You started thinking of giving spares to a lot of people around. A lot of countries around us want spares, especially now that Russia is not in a position to give spares, and a lot of people have Russian equipment. So that's an opportunity where people are exploiting. And then, of course, this huge startup ecosystem which has come into place, because you need to have a special system for these startups to make them grow and contribute to our system. So things are happening. I mean, it's something which I see. Look, I'm in the IIT. There's a big push towards getting, IITs to contribute. All this will take time. It's not going to happen in a hurry. It's a process. It's that process can't be shortened. Just like a baby has to come out in 9 months, this also has a time period. So we'll have to wait that period and be patient about it.
All right, sir. Thank you so much. We've covered a lot of ground today on opportunities, challenges, and success stories, and also putting things in perspective. Thank you so much, sir. It was a pleasure to have you on the podcast and to have you share your views with us. It was deeply appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. To make sure you don't miss it, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts from. To learn more about our research and team, you can visit us at carnegieindia.org. You can also find us on social media on X, Facebook, and Instagram. Thank you for listening. See you next time.